we're back. We want to welcome you to the A is A podcast, where we believe truth is a cornerstone to your success. So welcome, everyone. Andy and Ricky are on today's call, and we're going to dive into a really cool topic. Andy, what are we going to talk about?
This episode is going to be about sleep, what it is, why it's important, what it does for us, how we screw it up, and what we can do to get better sleep. And I wanted to tell the audience, sleep is something, it's really important, something I've looked into a bit, but it's definitely not a specialty of mine. Last year I read a book, and I recommended it to you, Josh. I'm not sure if you got around to it yet, but Why We Sleep by Matt Walker.
Yeah.
Did you read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely incredible book. It's, with a lot of the topics that we talk about, I'm pulling in knowledge from like various books that I've read and various podcasts and just, lots of experience.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to sleep, after I read that book, I'm like, this is like all you need to know everything that there is about sleep and why it's important. I mean, he just consolidated everything that's known about sleep. Matt Walker is he's a scientist at Berkeley, actually. And then he's also, I think he's a professor of both neuroscience and psychology, if I remember correctly. But so, yeah, just to let the audience know, because the last thing we want to do is plagiarize or anything like that. I always like to give credit where it's due. Pretty much everything that we're talking about today is coming from Matt Walker's book. Usually I write up a list of notes for our podcast, but today I'm just pulling up some notes that I took a year ago when I read this book. And I figure I'll just follow that right down the line and hit some important points. But I definitely recommend to anyone who's listening that wants to learn about sleep, we're just going to touch on these things a little bit for half an hour or whatever it'll be. Definitely Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker is a book worth buying.
Yeah, and I'll add to that real quick. One sleep book before we get started that had a huge impact on me years ago was Why We Sleep by T.S. Wiley.
What's it called? Why We Sleep?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Lights Out.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. I knew that you had that book. I was going to actually ask you what your book was.
Yes. Lights Out, Sleep, Sugar, and Survival. T.S. Wiley, I think I read it years ago. But yeah, phenomenal explanation from like a basic standpoint on why this could be, one of the most critical links.
Yeah, I think it's so important to talk about because most people don't really think about sleep so much, and it's so incredibly just critical to our health in a lot of ways, which we'll talk about today.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start off by just saying just a really brief overview. 2/3 of all adults don't get the recommended 8 hours of sleep per night, and that is a little bit individual. You hear people saying that they do really well with 5 or 6 hours of sleep. Some people say they need 9 or 10. But after reading Matt Walker's book, I learned that getting over 7 hours of sleep every night is actually really important because a lot of stuff happens in one of the last stages of sleep at the very end in like that 7th to 8th hour. And so a lot of people are really missing out on that part, and we'll see why that's detrimental in some ways. Just a really brief overview, consequences of getting less than 7 hours of sleep. Immune system disruption, cancer risk doubles, increased Alzheimer's risk, blood sugar rises. Actually, if you get a really bad night of sleep, your blood sugar rises into the pre-diabetic range for the entire next day, which is really interesting. And most people are already in that pre-diabetic range anyway, or a lot of people are, so it just exacerbates that problem. Weight gain, lots of overeating and bad decisions, and mood disorders and depression. And then sleep benefits on the flip side of the coin, enhances learning and memory, recalibrates your emotional response. There's a lot of interesting things that it does for mood and emotional. Well, what's that? Not IQ, but EQ, your emotional intelligence, I think. That's really ramped up through good, healthy sleep. Upregulates the immune system, balances blood glucose, regulates your appetite, improves your microbiome. So a lot of really good things. It's a worthwhile topic to talk about.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, I figured we'd start with just a really small overview of some of I'm thinking of 2 hormones and one other molecule that are really important in understanding how sleep happens and how it's regulated. Do either of you want to take a guess at like one or two, like the 2 hormones I'm thinking of, or maybe even the other molecule?
well, the one hormone that comes to mind, cortisol.
Yep, that's one of them.
Yep. And
Melatonin.
That's the other one. Yeah, exactly. And then the molecule that I'm thinking of is something called adenosine. I don't know if you guys have heard of that or
Yep.
know what that does. Yeah, okay. Yep. Ricky's our bioscience guy. He knows all these. He could probably draw the structure of it. So let me just touch on those really fast, just one sentence each. Melatonin, it's usually referred to as the sleep hormone, but that tends to rise around 8 p.m. It starts to rise and be released by our brain when darkness sets in. So, kind of depends on the time of day, the time of year. In the winter time, it gets dark around like 5, 6 p.m. So you get an earlier melatonin rise. Mm-hmm. And then in the summer, when it's light out until 8:30 or 9 p.m., we had a slightly later rise. But in general, around 8 p.m. is when melatonin starts to go up. And that signals to your body that it's time to sleep, basically. Cortisol, that's a wakefulness hormone. We all know that. And that rises and starts to rise around 5 a.m., 6 a.m., and then it spikes around 9 a.m. in the morning. Mm-hmm. And then adenosine is, it's a molecule that makes us feel sleepy and drowsy, and it builds up throughout the day. So your adenosine levels are really low in the morning, and then they're a little bit higher midday, and then a little higher in like late afternoon. And then around when we go to bed at night, it's really, really high. It's basically the chemical that pressures us into needing sleep and feeling like we have to fall asleep. And the only thing that clears adenosine out of your body is sleep. So like I said, it rises throughout the day and puts more pressure on you, making you feel more and more tired. And then at the end of the day, when we do sleep is what washes all that adenosine away. And then you're reset for the next morning. And I can briefly say that's actually how caffeine works. Everyone knows if you want to feel more alert and wakeful, you can take caffeine. And the reason for that is, so adenosine is the molecule that makes you feel sleepy. Caffeine competes with adenosine for a certain receptor in the brain. So when caffeine takes up all of those spots in the brain, adenosine can't be detected, basically. So you don't feel that sleepiness. It's still building up. The adenosine is still there. And when the caffeine wears off, you'll feel it afterwards. But that's why caffeine keeps you awake. That's why you can drink a cup of coffee at night and get an extra couple hours out of your night. That's not a good idea. So that's all. It's pretty cool. I mean, the thing that I just want people to understand there is just that this is like a really tightly controlled system. It's this built-in biological clock. It goes along with your circadian rhythm. It's just really important. It regulates our sleep-wake cycle, and it's something you don't want to mess up at all. And I'm sure you guys know that plenty of people have disrupted circadian rhythms,
Mm-hmm.
It is. I read a while back, and I don't know if this is true or not. For me, it is. But does coffee have a 12-hour half-life? So like caffeine?
I think that's exactly correct. Yeah, they usually say 12 hours or so.
Yeah.
For the listener, the half-life is like after 12 hours, say you drink 100 milligrams of caffeine, mm-hmm. In a coffee or something, 12 hours later, you still have half of that in your system. So you still have 50 milligrams.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about for people who have trouble sleeping and they're drinking a lot of caffeine, but they say, oh, I cut off my caffeine at noon. It shouldn't affect me. Mm-hmm. But really all those cups of coffee you're drinking at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., noon, they're still in your system when you go to bed at night.
Yeah. And think about like how that compounds as far as like a cup of coffee is what, 80 milligrams?
80 to 100. It
depends on how big, right?
Yeah. That's true. Depends who you ask.
Yeah.
But think about like, the people, listening possibly, or people out there, getting 3, 4, maybe even 500 milligrams a day, mm-hmm. living off of this, and how much it is affecting their sleep and preparation for sleep without them even knowing it.
Yeah.
Like last week, I was having like a slightly higher heart rate in the afternoon and the evening, and I didn't understand why. And then I had realized what I did was I only normally have 8 to 10 ounces of black coffee in
And
the
you do
morning.
it around like 7 a.m. or something, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah. Yep. Like between 7 and 8, and then I'm done. And what I was doing was, I'm really into this, like yogi tea now. We ordered a variety pack with like probably 30 varieties. I'm just trying them all. What I was doing is at 2, I was adding in a caffeine, like a green tea or vanilla spice or something with like 70 milligrams. And I did that for like 2 weeks, and that caught up with me, and I could feel it with the heart rate and my sleep. I wasn't winding down nearly like I used to. And then this week, what was it? Saturday is when I cut out all caffeine, and within a few days, oh man, sleeping heavy like a rock. I'm drowsy at night like I should be. My heart rate is totally chill. And again, this is probably only 80, maybe 150 milligrams total that I was taking that pushed me over. So I just wanted to say that, like, that's, it could be jacking you up more than you think.
Yeah. I actually have like a love-hate relationship with coffee. There's some mornings where, like, if I know I have a rough workout ahead and maybe I'm just feeling a little groggy that morning, then that's whenever I'll kick in with a cup of coffee. But I would say I'm like you. There was a point in my life during college, I just quit cold turkey, stopped taking caffeine in, and that was probably the best decision I ever made.
And I think that's the best decision that a lot of people can make. Like me, I have like a similar experience. I've definitely abused caffeine from time to time, and I still do from time to time. I was actually talking to Josh in the gym just yesterday, saying that I was having a really bad week of sleep this last week. And because I have the same love-hate relationship that you do, Ricky, because I know what caffeine does to me, and I know that it affects my sleep, and I want less of it. But during periods of a lot of stress or a lot of work or whatever, sometimes I do rely on that as a crutch to kind of like help me be energized during gym sessions or something like that. And this past week, I definitely had more caffeine than I should have. I tried to usually just have a couple cups of green tea in the morning, getting done around 10 a.m. But this past week, there was a couple of days where I had some pretty big coffees all the way until noon. And there's no question that affected my sleep.
Yeah.
Actually.
And I was looking it up, actually. We talked about how it was like a 12-hour half-life. I wanted to see what it actually was.
Oh, yeah. Fact check us, please.
Yeah, apparently it's like the mean is around 5 hours, but it depends on the individual. Some individuals can actually be as little as 1.5 hours, but some as long as 9.5.
Oh, okay. So it's still not 12. Huh. I wonder where we got that number.
It's still interesting, though, is even at 9 hours, if it's a half-life, that if you've got 200 milligrams circulating through your system, you've still got 100 milligrams 9 hours later. And if you're hitting that 2 p.m., coffee, you're still jazzed, to a certain level. The other thing, Saturday, what's today, Thursday, cut out that caffeine. I noticed the other thing, I was finding when I was hitting the 2 caffeines a day that I was not wanting to get up in the morning. Like it was just like a slug. And then all this week, I've been up and at 'em and going, no alarm clock at 6 a.m. Like hammering work by like 6:20. And, and I attribute that, nothing else has changed. Stress is still the same. Life is still the same, but it's that caffeine. I'm getting to bed and I'm sleeping heavy by like 9:15, 9:30. And then I am like I can't even fake sleep at 6 a.m. I'm up. So
yeah, such an important thing to understand that all these things that we use as crutches, be it caffeine or anything else that people use throughout their day, they're always a double-edged sword. And usually what you find out in the long run, it's kind of wisdom that you gain through experience, is that it's not worth it. The detriments they usually outweigh the positives, the immediate positive effect. So, okay, yeah, let's hit real quick some interesting facts here. I wanted to talk about the brain health benefits of sleep, because sleep is really, really good for the brain. And I never realized how much so until, it's a little bit obvious, but reading the book, I learned so much more about what actually happens during sleep that's good for your brain. one thing is that it's very neuroprotective. So it protects your brain and protects brain cells. Matt Walker actually describes wakefulness, like just where we are right now, having this podcast, as mildly brain damaging, and sleep is kind of what corrects for that. So it reduces dementia and Alzheimer's risk substantially. And there's some really cool new research on this. But the cool thing that I learned, the thing I liked most about this was I learned about this thing called the glymphatic system. So you guys know that we have the lymphatic system that runs through the whole body. And that's responsible for, it's got a few different roles, but it also cleanses the body in some way. It helps move and circulate waste and kind of clean up certain areas of the body, among other functions that it does. The brain has this newly discovered thing called the glymphatic system, very similar, but this is where, so you have these things called glial cells in the brain, and for a long time, scientists didn't really know what they were for. They almost thought it was like kind of almost like similar to junk DNA, just like a substance that was there that didn't seem to serve any role. But what happens when you're sleeping at night is these glial cells shrink to almost half of their normal size. And that allows for a lot more cerebral spinal fluid, CSF, to be pushed through the brain. And it just kind of circulates. And it's like a pressure washer for your brain, which is really cool because it rids the brain of all sorts of toxic compounds that have kind of built up throughout the day. And it just rinses the brain out the whole time that you're sleeping. The connection there to Alzheimer's was really interesting because Alzheimer's disease is a condition where these proteins start to build up in the brain and they cause plaques. And the proteins are amyloid beta proteins and then tau proteins. And it's always building up all throughout the day. But when we sleep at night and this glymphatic system just power washes the brain, it rids the brain of all of those, we'll say toxic proteins, which if they build up, then they start to form plaques. And that's one of the root causes of Alzheimer's disease. So if that's something you're trying to avoid, sleep is a phenomenal way to kind of ensure against that. I'll add in, let's see, I had two other things here aside from the neuroprotective. It improves learning. So sleep, both before and after. Before learning, it kind of declutters the brain, freeing up space for new information. And then after learning, so say you learn something at night and then you sleep on it, it kind of cements the information that you learned in your brain. That's kind of where sleep is, where a lot of processing takes place and a lot of stuff is integrated that you learned throughout the day. We all know that sleep is like kind of where we repair and recover and process things, but it was neat to learn a little bit more about how it enhances learning in that same way by cementing what you learned so that you have in long-term memory for, for the future. And then this one is really cool. I thought maybe one of you guys could chime in on this a little bit. I really like this a lot, that physical skills, it's not just things you learned like facts and, if you read a book or whatever, but also physical skills are cemented by sleep. So like, I'm thinking of like muscle memory, how, skills like handstands, rock climbing, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, a sport that you're playing, riding a bicycle, playing guitar, playing piano, that sort of thing. It's learned during the day when you practice, but then it's cemented and reinforced during sleep. So, you find, and I found this before, and this is where I was thinking maybe you guys could chime in. I don't know if you had a similar experience, but if I practice something at night, whether it's like just practicing some guitar or just some new, like skill, like a handstand thing that I'm trying to work on, you practice in the evening and maybe you don't do so well, but then you sleep and let your brain do its thing and kind of like integrate everything you learned, and you find that you're much better at it the next morning. And that's kind of what the research suggests and supports. I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that, where you kind of practice something, but then you wake up the next day and it comes to you a lot easier.
Yeah, the example that I can give, and it's not exactly that, but it's similar, is Paul Chek, the strength coach.
Yeah.
He did a lot of research on like physical repair and muscle memory. And he had found that sleeping between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is when the majority of that stuff is sinking in to our actual muscles and cognitive piece as far as memory goes. And so, yeah, I have definitely found that when I'm sleeping within that window really well, like in deep sleep, I'm able to recover and also rehearse and remember things better the next day physically than if I go to bed at, midnight. Along with that research, he had also said that for every hour you sleep before midnight is equivalent to 2 hours. I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I don't know how true that is, but I really just, my experience tells me there's something to that.
Yeah, me
like
too.
Definitely, if I can fall asleep before midnight, I really do feel like that 10 p.m. to midnight, if I can get those 2 hours in, my sleep is so much better and I feel so much better the next day. Yeah. Like even if you still get 8 hours, like I'd rather get from 10 a.m. to 6 a.m. than midnight to 8. You feel a lot better.
Oh yeah, any day of the week I would choose that. And if I do the 12 to 8, I wake up at 8 feeling totally different than I do at 6. That the window, the 10 to 6, as far as just alertness and energy goes. So yeah, that's how I can relate to that a little bit.
Yeah, that one was really cool for me just because, I know we work at a gym and we're always working on with clients on things like muscle building, weight loss and stuff. But, the three of us, I know that like one of the things that we train for a lot are these skill things, whether it's the hand balancing or for me, it's rock climbing, Josh, you do jujitsu, so on, where it's not just about like physical ability, but it's actually like there's a brain component there too. And I love knowing that sleep is going to seriously enhance my performance in those activities that I'm trying to, develop the skill in. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
And one thing to say there is just that most of this learning to 9th hours of sleep. So that's one of the reasons why trying not to cut your sleep short is really, really important. So let's see, let's hit, that was that topic. I wanted to hit REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. That's when we dream. And that seems to be, in the book, Matt Walker talked about REM sleep a lot. He got pretty deep into that and he seems to think that it's, all of sleep is important, but this is an area that he thinks is really important and where a lot of people are missing out on. So like I said, REM sleep is when we dream. It regulates your emotions. It's got a lot to do with mood. It boosts your EQ, like I already said, makes us more emotionally capable and emotionally resilient. So people who get more REM sleep connect better with others. They have better social lives typically. And that's because we have an increased capacity for empathy and other social skills. And that's all reinforced during REM sleep. REM also fuels creativity, which is really cool. New neural connections are formed during REM. Sometimes we get insights and ideas during REM. We're going to come back on that too, because I'm wondering what you guys are going to say about this. But the reason why we miss out on REM sleep so much is because late morning is when we get the most REM. Like I said, it only makes up 25% of your sleep. And more of the earlier hours are going to be the non-REM sleep. The latter quarter of your sleep, like I said, the 7th to 9th hours are when you get the majority and the most potent benefits from your REM sleep. So that's why it's so critical to really try to get over 7 hours a night, even if you think that you're someone who does well on 5 or 6. So it's kind of all I wanted to say about that one.
Yeah, and you said that the REM sleep is where you dream, right?
Yeah, so that's actually what I was going to talk about next. It's when we dream, and but he talked about 2 purposes of dreaming. One being emotional and psychological health, and the other one being problem solving and creativity. And these are both really cool. We dream for emotional and psychological health. Like I already said, REM sleep soothes your emotional distress, any sort of emotional distress that you're accumulating through a stressful life, busy life, and any trauma, micro trauma experienced during the day. So it's really a time of processing the events that happen during the day, and it's really important for coping with your daily stressors. So if you're missing out on that, especially the last couple hours of sleep and not getting your REM, you're going to be a lot more irritable, have a hard time connecting, and you're not going to deal well with the regular stresses of life. So if you're lacking sleep or only getting 6 hours a night, you're probably going to feel a lot more stressed during the day because you're missing out on this coping mechanism.
Yeah.
There's a hormone called noradrenaline. I mean, you guys know about this one. It's a stress hormone. It's like a fight or flight hormone, right? Mm-hmm. And REM sleep is actually the only time in our lives where noradrenaline is at absolute zero. We usually have a little bit in our bloodstream, or a lot, depending on how high or low stress we are. But during sleep is when noradrenaline goes to absolutely like rock bottom levels. So when we're reprocessing the stressful events that happen throughout sleep, we're doing that in a stress-free state. That helps us wake up feeling a little more at peace and just capable of dealing with the stress that life throws at.
Did I lose you guys?
Andy, you there?
You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I think I have a bad connection. Yeah. Okay. Did you get everything I just said there? Or did I cut out on you?
The stress hormone was at its rock bottom, you had said, right? When we're in the sleep stage. And that's where you left off.
I left off where?
Where the stress hormone was at its rock bottom during sleep.
Oh yeah, so I was just saying that, so when we reprocess the events of the day, we're doing it in a stress-free state because the stress hormone is so low, which allows us to wake up feeling more kind of at peace with the prior day's stresses and more able to cope with them the next day. So it's a really important kind of stress relieving thing, getting enough sleep.
Well, and that's interesting because I would say a large majority of people miss out on that 7 to 9 hour window there.
Definitely.
And how big is stress as a problem in most people's lives? You know, most people will tell you that they feel overly stressed. We hear that all the time.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, I mean, there's definitely times of like high levels of stress, you know, that you just can't overcome. No matter what it is, you're going to be stressed out about it. Because I remember when I was in grad school, when I was studying for something, or if I was going to present something, you know, I would have dreams where like my teeth were falling out, or, you know, or I was too weak to turn on a light or turn off a light or something. And I can tell you it was affecting my sleep because I would wake up in the middle of the night, or, you know, so that was kind of, I know I wasn't sleeping my best, and I was always trying to get, you know, 7 hours. I feel like 7 hours and 30 minutes is kind of my sweet spot, but I shoot over that. And yeah, so that was kind of just one thing where I wouldn't say it always de-stressed me from the other day, but it did help me in some ways to kind of like cope with it in some instances, or sometimes gave me ideas of how to reinforce or how to even present more efficiently than I thought, you know, or that I had practiced prior. So
yeah, and you make a good point that, you know, stress is never going to go away. Like, our lives are going to have periods of high and low stress, but it's just important to know that this REM sleep, and especially those later hours, just kind of help us cope with it a lot better. You know, they give us the ability to process it and come out feeling a little more capable of handling it the next day. You know, and you're setting yourself up for a really rough time if you miss out on that. And then the other thing I want to say about REM sleep is just that dreaming is really important, and REM sleep is really important for problem solving and creativity. And I really like this a lot. REM is where our brain makes connections between several different areas of knowledge and experience that we might not normally connect during the daytime. Your brain is basically trying to construct a large scale picture of life and kind of integrate and bring everything together. So it helps us figure out how things fit together in our life and how things are related. It's a highly creative process, which, I mean, you know, the benefits there are obvious. You know, we're all trying to figure out how to navigate life best. And the more that you can kind of integrate everything that's happening to you and see how it all connects, the better. And this is why we get that. And it's actually really good advice to sleep on a problem. And that's where I wanted to see if you guys wanted to chime in on this. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but for me, it happens a lot where if there's some problem that you're working on, like for me with school, when I used to go to school and I was working on an assignment and trying to do some creative project or something, I'd work on it all evening and maybe be banging my head against the wall, but then you get a good night's sleep and you wake up in the morning and like the answers just come to you. I don't know. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Yeah, quite a bit actually. So like before I go to bed, I'll set sometimes like an intention going to bed in terms of like needing a business idea or you know, some kind of goal I'm working towards or something that I want to wrap my head around. And I almost end my day with that. And there will be many mornings that I wake up and I have insights into that. And it freaks me out, but I've got some of my best unique ideas with that process. And I think it all comes down to setting that intention, like as you're falling asleep, like thinking about it, sort of rehearsing it a little bit and just letting it sit in there. And you know, there are many mornings, I'll probably say 2 to 3 a week, where I'll wake up and I almost have like a to-do list in my head right when I wake up. And it's all just things that have been subliminally planted in my head while I sleep. I'm talking about like quotes and like, you know, actual like tangible action items for the day, and I like run downstairs and get started before I lose it. So yeah, it happens to me.
I love this. Yeah. I love this because you just hit on like the one tip that I wanted to give people before we leave this section is just the idea of like priming your brain. You know, like you said, setting intentions when you go to bed, or thinking about things that are important to you, you know, problems you want to solve, or you know, whatever is interesting to you at the time. You can prime your brain with that and let your brain do its thing overnight and maybe wake up with some ideas the next morning.
Well, I mean,
that's one of the reasons why journaling at night is so useful too.
Well, that's where, you know, that whole phrase, you know, sleep on it comes from, right?
Yeah, sleep on a problem. Yep.
Yeah. Whenever you're banging your head against the wall, like you guys were saying, sometimes it's better just to, you know, turn everything off and take that break. And I can remember one particular time at work where I was trying to program something into our dispensing unit, and I needed to write this complex program in order to get the certain result. And I tried all day. I couldn't figure it out. I came home. I was thinking about it. I was trying to scribble stuff down to figure it out, and I couldn't figure out what to do. Sure enough, I slept on it. The next morning, I woke up with an idea. I was like, oh man, I rushed into work. I was like, I cannot wait to try this. And I went in, sure enough, it worked. And I was just like, I was amazed. So
yeah, you hear all the time about like cutting edge scientists and stuff coming up with some of their best ideas, either in a dream or right when they wake up. You might know, Ricky, I don't know the guy's name. It might be Mendeleev, who wrote the periodic table of the elements.
Yeah.
Was it him? I think so.
Yeah, Gregory Mendeleev.
Yeah, I think that came to him in a dream, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah, I don't know that much historical facts, but
yeah, but that's pretty crazy. That I mean, that's quite the achievement to take all the elements that exist in the universe and figure out how they structure and work together. And it came to him in a dream. Like, how wild is that? You know, It really is kind of a superpower.
Yeah, I had a stage years ago where, you know, when I was training within CrossFit and competing, I would take like a 1 hour afternoon nap, and it would be a deep, deep sleep. And I would come up with in crazy, like eye-opening things during that sleep for the rest of the day, or things I've been working on. So like when we were naming Fit Kids, Fit Future, our curriculum company, I came up with that during sleep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And like many different things have come to me during napping throughout the day, because I think it's sort of planted in there, and then you get a deload period to just sort of, like Ricky said, sleep on it, and then boom. But I think that it'd be interesting to poll the population, but they're never able, most aren't able to recharge enough to get creative ever.
Yep.
And I find that when I'm writing or maybe doing talks, or I am in this creative mindset, which is not all the time, it's cyclical, I have to be super recharged to enter that stage. If I'm working more in the trenches, day-to-day activities, different set of actions, I can't try to play that creative director role because it's just, I'm not recovered and prepared for that. But through sleep and naps and all of that, I think you can really tap in really deep.
I think there's a good argument to be made for napping more frequently to be more productive. It's a shame that napping and just sleep in general is sometimes stigmatized as being laziness, but you can actually, I think, get a huge return on investment when it comes to sleep. And it's actually can make you more productive to spend a little more time sleeping or napping during the day.
And guys, I need to chime in. I messed up.
Oh,
it's not Gregory, it's Dimitri.
Oh, dude, that's okay. Yep, that's right.
So.
Oh, you're fact checking yourself.
I am. I don't just fact check you guys. I fact check myself. Nice. And I mean, I have some brain fog sometimes, and I can admit it. So,
ladies and gentlemen, Ricky keeping the ASA podcast honest.
Yeah, we need that. We need that, Ricky. Good.
Yeah. Should you be the guy that, like on Joe Rogan's podcast, when he says, "Jamie, pull that up. We should go." It's quick.
I could probably handle that.